Hey, shalom, shalom. Most High Christ bless. Most High Christ bless. Let me check this real quick. Good morning, Israel. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hopefully, y'all can hear me. Okay, today's topic is the Hasmonean legacy. The Hasmonean legacy. All right. Hopefully, you got your pens, your papers, if y'all up this morning. It is currently Eastern Standard Time, 5 a.m. So history in the a.m. We're gonna go over a little bit of the Hasmonean. Now, before we go over that, I'm gonna cover some brief history prior to the Maccabees or the Hasmonean. Okay, so hold on, let me fix this. Get this out the way. All right, let's open up with Job 8 and 8. We're gonna open up with Job 8 and 8. All right, the book of Job, chapter 8 and verse 8. For inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to the search of their fathers. So this Job is counseling us to go to the history, go to the archives, go to the records, to look up our fathers, to look for the records and see how they dwelt. Let me get that in Romans as well. Romans chapter 15 and verse 4. Paul also spoke about going back to the ancient. Romans chapter 15 and verse 4. For whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we, through patience and comfort of the scriptures, might have hope. So going to the church of our fathers is supposed to increase our faith, give us hope that we have a God. And when we go into this history, you'll see how our forefathers operated and how they always trusted in the Lord, especially those who stayed in the spirit, as we should to today in these trying times. Okay. Let me make sure y'all can see me. So all praises. All right. Hopefully y'all can see me. Let me see. Okay. All right. So all right, we good. All right. So we got a shirts of our father. So let's open up with the book. Well, we open up. Let's go to the book of Daniel. Before we go to the Apocrypha, I'm gonna go to the book of Daniel first. The book of Daniel, chapter 8 and verse 8. Therefore, the he goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. Now, I'm gonna stop there. To understand the he goat, this is the dream of Daniel. Daniel seen his dream during the time of Babylon, and he dreamed his dream hundreds of years prior to it actually happening. Now remember, he is prophesying. So he's prophesying here in the book of Daniel, chapter 8. I'm reading again, verse 8. Therefore, the he goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. Now I'm gonna stay in the same chapter, and I'm gonna jump down to verse 21, which will explain who the he goat is and also the horn. Okay, verse 21. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, which is Greece, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now, this king is talk about Alexander the Great. Now, I'm gonna prove that. Now, mind you, this is the interpretation of what we read in verse 8. Daniel, the Lord is explaining to Daniel what the he goat meant and what the horn meant. We read in verse 8. It reads again, verse 21, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. And that first king goes into Alexander the Great. I'm gonna go to First Maccabees 1 in verse 1. First Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, the son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came of the land of Kittim or Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persian and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece. Now, this is the first Idumean Edom, or today we call Caucasian, was a superpower upon the earth. So Alexander the Great or Alexander the Greek, historically, you can look this up. He became the superpower in 333 BC. He took down Darius the king. Prior to Greek being over the whole earth, being that superpower, we had Persian and Medes. We was under the Persian and Medes captivity. So now we're reading here that Alexander crushed Darius the king at the time and took over. This is 333 BC. I'm going to read it again in verse 1. And it happened after that, Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece. Now, Daniel was during the time of the Babylon captivity. Babylon captivity was in 605 to 535 BC. And this was thousands, hundreds of years before Greek. You got a whole captivity during the Persian captivity, which was 535, between 535 and 333 BC. You talk about Daniel seeing this vision in Babylon captivity. So we let you know our forefathers was prophets. He prophesied this over hundreds of years prior to it happening. So we going back to Daniel's 8. Wait a minute. Well, yeah, we're going back. We're going to come back to First Maccabees 1, but we're going to go back to Daniel's 8 and verse 21 again. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. We just read Alexander the Great was who conquered over Darius, king of Persia, who was the first over Greece. That now we know what Grecia means, going into Greece. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Let you know the horn is symbolic or similitude that Daniel was seeing in a vision, and God is interpreting the dream to him and saying that horn represent the first king over Greece, and that's Alexander the Great. So letting you know Alexander the Great was mentioned in the scriptures, and we know that's historically. That there prove the Bible is a true book. But anyways, back to the verse 8 now. Daniel chapter 8 and verse 8. Therefore, the he-goat waxed very great. So Grecia became a superpower on the earth. That's what it's going to. The he-goat goes into Greece. The great horn was broke. I'm sorry. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken. Now that horn we see that represents symbolic of Alexander, the first king. It says it was broken. What does it mean that it was broken? We're going to go back to First Maccabees chapter 1, and this time we're gonna read verse 5. Now I'm going a little fast because I got a lot to cover. It's a long class, so bear with me, Israel. So First Maccabees, pay attention now. First Maccabees 1. We read verse 1. Now we're going to read verse 5 to explain what does it mean by that horn being broken. And that horn represents the first king, which is Alexander the Great. Okay. First Maccabees 1 and verse 5. And after these things, well, let me read verse 4. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. This is Alexander. When he became the superpower, he subdued all nations and provinces around the various area. Okay. In most of his area, Alexander the Great ruled. Alexander ruled, and when he ruled, he took over Greek, Asia Minor, which is today Turkey, Middle East, and Egypt. So when we read verse 4 again, it says, and he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. And after these things, he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned, this is verse 7. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then he died. So, what are we reading? We're reading the point of when Alexander was broken. So when Daniel seen in a vision that he's seen this horn broken, he didn't know what it meant. And now we're reading the history of it, that the broken mean he died, he fell sick. Because Alexander, he died of syphilis. He had a lot of homosexual uh sex going on, orgies and stuff like that. So the Lord smite him and put him to death. Okay, let me read First Maccabees 1 and verse 5 again. And after these things, he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then he died. So Alexander ruled 12 years and then he died. He was a superpower. And he divided his kingdom amongst his four generals. That's what it means. What the servants that was honorable that was brought up with him from his youth. So we're gonna go back to Daniel chapter 8 and verse 8 again. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn. When he was strong, man, he was conquering. He turned a lot of kings and countries unto tributaries unto him. That's what I mean by he was strong. This is Grecia, the kingdom of Grecia. The great horn, which is the first king Alexander, was broken. He fell sick. For it, for and for it came up four notable ones. Those notable ones are those honorable servants that was brought up with him from his youth. So you got to imagine Daniel seeing this in a vision. He's not understanding, but the Most High is interpreting it to him. So Daniel seen the kingdoms of Greece start their superpower and also fail. So those four notable ones is Seleucus or Seleucus. I think it's Seleucus. Seleucus, who ruled over Syria, Ptolemy, who ruled over Egypt, Lysimachus, Asia Minor, and Cassander over Greece and Mesopotamia. So these were the four generals that came up, that was honorable or noble ones that came up with Alexander the Great, and they kind of took over, and they started the Hellenized the Jerusalem. They started Hellenizing everything once they start taking power. Okay. So let's go back. Let's go back to Daniel 8. Now we're going to read verse 9. So again, the four notable ones is Seleucus over Syria. He took over Syria. Ptolemy took over Egypt. Lysimachus took over Asia Minor, and Cassander took over Greek and Mesopotamia. All right. Verse 9. And out of one of them, so out of one of those four I just named, came forth a little horn, which waxen exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. Now you got to imagine from verse 8 and 9, you talking about a whole lot of years has passed. A lot of years has passed. So that little horn, when you read in history, came out of one of them was Seleucus. Okay. Let me get that in First Maccabees. Well, no, I'm gonna stay here. That little horn goes into Antiochus Epiphany. Antiochus Epiphany. He was that little horn that came out of Seleucus, one of the ruling superpower. Because when you read in history, Seleucus over Syria, he took over more of more of the kingdom under Alexander the Great. He was Seleucus Soter, one of the first kings who ruled over under Alexander, and they took over that area. He took over Syria, I think Babylon, and he took majority of the lands. In other words, so out of Seleucus came years later, not just immediately after Seleucus. It was Seleucus the first Soter. It was years later. I'm sorry, Seleucus the first Nicanor. Nicanor. That was directly Nicanor. He came under Alexander the Great, and after him came another Greek king. It was like 4 or 5 of them, and later on you got Antiochus Epiphany. So a lot of years has passed from the time of verse 8 to verse 9. We're going to get into it. I'm going to show you the different kings that came under. So verse 9 again, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxing exceeding great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. So this king here, Antiochus Epiphanes, conquered the south, which was Egypt, toward the east, and also the pleasant land. Let's get First Maccabees 1 and 20 to explain that pleasant land. We're going back to First Maccabees chapter 1. This time we're going to read verse 20. Verse 20. And after that, Antiochus had smitten Egypt, which is towards the south. We just read it, Daniel 8 and 9. He returned again in the 143rd year and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude. This is that pleasant land. So we understand that Antiochus went conquering, trying to conquer. He fought many battles in Egypt, but he never fully took over it. But he conquered. He fought battles in Egypt toward the east and also the pleasant land, which is Jerusalem. This brother, this king here, not the brother, this king, this Idumean Edomite king here wreaked havoc amongst the Israelites. I'm talking about this king was ruthless, ruthless, ruthless. Okay. So going back to Daniel's 8 and verse, now we're going to read verse 21 and 22 together to explain Daniel's 8 and 8 in verse 9. All right, Daniel 8 and verse 21. And the rough goat is the great king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king, Alexander the Great. Now that being broken, Alexander died, whereas four stood up. The four notable ones is Seleucus over Syria, Ptolemy over Egypt, Lysimachus, Asia Minor, and Cassander over Greece. Four kingdoms, and I name those kingdoms, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nations but not in his power. So letting you know those kingdoms is what we're talking about now. And out of Seleucus that was over Syria came forth years later Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay. Hopefully you got that. All right. I'm gonna go to this history here. Before I go there, I'm going to First Maccabees 8, but I want to go to the Wikipedia real quick. Now I know you're probably not going to be able to see this, but I'm going to read it. All you got to look up is Hannibal. The reason why I'm going to the history because it's going to explain the next point I'm going to make concerning the Greek taking over. So Hannibal in Wikipedia. All you got to do is type in Hannibal and go to Wikipedia. Public information. All right. Hannibal, I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to go to the second paragraph. This is going into the time of 218 BC. Now, this story is important because this goes into the history we're reading now concerning Antiochus, concerning Antiochus the Great, and all of them. So 218 BC, Hannibal. Okay, so we're going to read. I'm going to read a middle paragraph which is the second paragraph in the Wikipedia. If you go down, go to the second paragraph, kind of in the middle where it starts with the word Hannibal. Now, Hannibal was a black king. He was an Israelite who ruled and fought many battles, mighty battles. And in history, now if you go to Wikipedia, they show a monument or a statue of him being Esau. That is a lie. Hannibal was a black man. He was an Israelite. He fought the Punic War. His dad fought the first Punic War. Hannibal fought the second Punic War. And always vowed and followed his father's counsel by never making a league or a friendship with Rome, which was the Republic, and Roman Republic was at the time. So Hannibal himself was a very mighty warrior. He was expert in war. He did a lot of acts such as disguise himself with what they call them wigs, different color wigs and different warlike apparels, because he disguised himself amongst his army because they were always attempted to assassinate him. So he blended in to kind of forbid or hinder those would-be assassins. Okay, so Hannibal was very expert in war. Okay, so now let's go to Wikipedia. The second paragraph, this is during the time of 218 BC. I'm going to read in the middle of the second paragraph. It starts with Hannibal. Hannibal was disguised for his ability to determine both his and his opponent's respective strength and weaknesses, and to plan battles accordingly. His well-planned strategies allowed him to conquer and ally with several Italian cities that was previously allied to Rome. Now, that's why I'm going to this history. Now, Hannibal allied with a lot of Italian cities in those areas. So he when he made battles, he conquered various provinces in Italy. Okay. It says his well planned strategies allowed him to conquer an ally with several Italian cities that were previously allied to Rome. Hannibal occupied most of southern Italy for 15 years. So we was ruling the earth. Israel was ruling the earth in Spain, Europe. So a lot of this history we don't hear in our universities as well as our high schools today, in our these private these cemetery schools, I call them. All right, read it along. The Romans, led by Fabius Maximus, avoided directly engaging him, instead waging a war of attrition. Attrition is a form of battle where they allow they know they can't fight you head on. So what they do is, since they're close to their territory, they'll try to, and if they're close to their territory and you're in their territory, that means you're far from home. But during war, these war take years. So attrition, what they would do would they would try to hinder or block provisions to come to your army, such as materials, armory, weapons, food, things of that nature. So they'll try to fight you through hindering import. Like right now, what you read in history, and right now, what's taking place in Gaza, Israeli war under Netanyahu. He's stopping aid from getting to the West Bank or Gaza. So this is a form of attrition. They are stopping them from getting humanitarian aid. And he was talking about civilians. We ain't talking about the war, the army of Gaza. They talking about like Hamas. They're not doing that to Hamas. They're doing that to the citizens, women, children. That's what they're doing. So this is what Fabius Maximus was doing against Hannibal, because he was so much of a powerful fighter where you couldn't fight him head on. He would destroy you. And many rulers or generals from Rome got defeated by Hannibal. And Fabius Maximus was one of the few ones that decided not to fight him head on. So he tried this method of battle. So it was called the Fabian strategy. Look it up. All right. So let me read it again. So the Romans, led by Fabius Maximus, avoided directly engaging him, instead waging a war of attrition, the Fabian strategy. Carthaginian defeats in Hispania prevented Hannibal from being reinforced, and he was unable to win a decisive victory. A counter invasion of North Africa. That's proof. So a counter invasion in North Africa. So while he was fighting Fabian Maximus in the areas of Italy and those various area, he was being attacked by another Roman ruler that attacked his area. Today it was called I forget what it's called. Well, at the time it was called Carthage, which is North Africa. Let me look that up real quick. It was called Carthage. Let me look that up real quick. But today is not called Carthage. It's called something else. Give me a second. It's called Tunisia. Today it is called Tunisia. So if you look on a map, Tunisia, that is ancient Carthage or and there was a Carthaginian people. Today we got a lot of Arabs there. So it ain't, what I'm saying? There's a lot of Arabs there today. It's called Tunisia. So Israel. But back then, blacks rule in under Hannibal and the Carthaginians. These were Israelites. These were black folks. This is not Arabs, what you see today, because 95% of them right now is Arabs. All right, going back to Wikipedia on the Hannibal. Now we at the bottom of the second paragraph concerning. We're reading is the downfall of Hannibal. Now, mind you, he won many battles, but now we're just reading the end point because I want to get to a point, and we're gonna go back to the scriptures because you got to know this history to understand what we're going to read next in the Maccabees. All right, so back to the bottom, the last sentence or the last two sentences. I'll start off Hannibal again. Oh no, Carthaginian. So Carthage is Tunisia today. So Carthaginians' defeat in Hispania prevented Hannibal from being reinforced, and he was unable to win a decisive victory. A counter invasion of North Africa, led by the Roman general Scipio Africanus, forced him to return to Carthage, which today we call Tunisia. He forced him to stop his battle with Fabian Maximus, and he returned to Carthage, or he's returning to Carthage, which is today Tunisia. Hannibal was eventually defeated at the Battle of Zema, Zama, ending the war in the Roman ending the war in a Roman victory. So this was when Hannibal was defeated. Uh, it was called a Battle of Zema, Zama. It was a Battle of Zema. That's when Hannibal, the black ruler, was defeated, who was expert in war, by the way. And he was defeated by Scipio Africanus. Now, Scipio Africanus was a Italian navigator, also a Italian general who also fought Roman battles during the Roman Republic. Scipio Africanus is one of the generals who named the land or the continent Africa after himself. now you see the connecting the dots. So now you know how Africa got his name Africa, because prior to that it wasn't called Africa. God called it Ham or Canaanites or down in those areas. So, but Scipio Africanus was the one that took down Hannibal's army. Now, during the Roman Republic. Now we're going to go back to the scripture. Hold on, let me see. Oh, now I'm gonna go to the scriptures. First Maccabees 8. Now we're going to read that in the Bible. First Maccabees 8, we're going to start at verse 1. We're going to go back to Wikipedia because there's more history I want out of that, because it's a point I'm getting as well. So First Maccabees 8, and let's read verse 1. Now Judas had heard of the fame of the Romans, that they were mighty and valiant men, and such as would lovingly accept all that joined themselves unto them, and make a league of amity with all that came unto them. So now this is Judas Maccabees. How we get into the history. Judas Maccabees was also expert in war, by the way, and he was studying the Romans. That's what it means by Judas heard of the fame of the Romans. So Judas Maccabees was studying the Romans. This time it was called the Roman Republic, when they was becoming a superpower. Oh, my laptop about to die. Let me plug it up. Okay, there we go. So he was studying the Romans, right? At this time, the Roman Republic was conquering various provinces in the area. And what we're reading here is years later. Remember, Greece, Greek power, was the superpower, was ruling and conquering various areas under the four generals who had descendants after them, was conquering. Now we're talking about years later, the Roman Republic was taken over after that. So now we read in First Maccabees 8. So now verse 2. And that they were men of great valor, it was told him also of their wars and noble acts which they had done among the Galatians, and how they had conquered them and brought them under tribute. Now, Galatians mixing with Esau and Northern Kingdom. So Judas learned that these men was noble. They was men of valor, and they had mighty men, and they won a lot of wars and noble acts. So this is Judas Maccabees studying the Romans act and way of war. And let me read back verse 1. Let me explain verse 1 again. Now Judas had heard of the fame of the Romans, that they were mighty men, they were mighty and valiant men, and such as would loving accept all that joined themselves unto them, and make it league of amity. Amity means family friendly, or family relations, family relations. So Judas was learning that what the Romans would do was, if you didn't accept to pay tribute, they would destroy your provinces and take over. If you did, they will make a league with you and have friendly relations with you. That's what amity means. Verse 2. And that they were men of great valor, it was told him also of their wars and noble acts which they had done among the Galatians, and how they had conquered them and brought them under tribute. So what we're reading here is the Roman Republic conquering step by step. And we read that because one of the battles they fought was Hannibal. And Hannibal was fighting a lot of those Roman generals. But Fabian Maximus ended up doing a strategy to kind of fight him. He didn't beat him. It was later when Hannibal had to return back to Carthage, which is today Tunisia in North Africa. He had to go fight Scipio Africanus, which later defeated him at the Battle of Zama. Okay. Now, verse 3. And what they had done in the country of Spain. This is why I went to Wikipedia concerning Hannibal. We're reading in the Bible the Punic War. Spain was a territory that Hannibal ruled for 15 years. Let's go back. I know I missed it. Let's go back. Let's go back to Wikipedia under Hannibal. Uh, Middle paragraph. We're going to read it again. Hannibal was disguised for his ability to determine both his and his opponent's respective strength and weaknesses and to plan battles accordingly. His well planned strategies allowed him to conquer and ally with several Italian cities that were previously allied to Rome. You understand? We're reading this. Hannibal occupied most of southern Italy for 15 years. Now let's go back to First Maccabees 8. So now we're reading the history of it in the Bible. We're showing you the Bible is a true book. Ain't no doubt about it. First Maccabees 8 and verse 3. Now we're reading that Judas Maccabees was studying the Romans, how they was conquering, and the Roman Republic was conquering various provinces in the area. And they went as far as Italy. Okay. Verse 3, First Maccabees 8 and verse 3. And what they had done in the country of Spain for the winning of the mines of the silver and gold which is there, and that by their policy and patience they had conquered all the place, though it were very far from them, and the kings also that came against them from the uttermost part of the earth, till they had discomforted them and gave them a great overthrow, so that the rest did give them tribute every year. So this is the defeat of Hannibal. Okay, so Hannibal was beat by Scipio Africanus, one of the Roman generals that went to Tunisia, which was ancient called Carthage, which was the Carthaginians. They got defeated, and that's what you read about Spain there. Spain was at the time ruled by Hannibal. Now, let's go back to Wikipedia. Now we're going to come back to First Maccabees 8 because there's more history going into this. So now we're reading about in First Maccabees 8, the Roman Republic taking over, and Judas Maccabees is studying them. And one of the wars they took over was one of the areas in territory they took over was Spain, Italy, which was ruled by Hannibal. And Hannibal had a lot of mines and golds and his wealth. Now that territory that Hannibal conquered, which is Spain, that was one of his strongholds. This is one of his, like, let's for like a better term, headquarters. So if you conquer that, you kind of defeated Hannibal. He lost all his. It's like what they did to us in 70 AD. You just in 70 AD when Rome came in 70 AD and took over Israel, Jerusalem, they completely destroyed us when they destroyed our temple, which is our headquarters. So that's what happened to Hannibal. All right, and so Hannibal wasn't killed. He ended up going into exile and he retreated. That's what happened to him, and we're gonna see where he retreated. This goes in, we're going into history. So now we're going back to Wikipedia under Hannibal. We're going to the third paragraph now. Hannibal was defeated in the Battle of Zima. Now we're going to the third paragraph. Okay. After the war, Hannibal successfully ran for the office of Suffet or Suffet. When you look up the word Suffet, it's S-U-F, S-U, let me spell it for you, S-U-F-E-T. In Hebrew, it's spelled S-H-O-P-H-E-T, Shufet. It just means a judge. In Hebrew, a judge, like the Book of Judges, a judge. So he ran for office. So it's a political office that he ran for, and then when he ran into exile. Going back to Wikipedia under Hannibal, third paragraph. After the war, Hannibal successfully ran for the office of Suffet, which is a judge. He enacted political and financial reforms to enable that payment of the war indemnity imposed by Rome. Okay, so he ran for office to try to destroy the sanction that Rome put on Tunisia or Carthage at the time, and he want to pay it, so he tried to destroy that by running for office to change the laws on that. Because remember, when we read in First Maccabees, they had policies. Verse 4 says, and that by their policy and patience they had conquered all places. So they put a lot of countries and territories into tributes. They created policies to say you had to pay us this, and we tax you every year. So Hannibal ran for office as judge in a political forum to try to change that policy. Okay, reading right along. Those reforms were unpopular with members of the Carthaginians aristocracy and in Rome, and he fled into voluntary exile. This is Hannibal. He fled into exile. During this time, he lived at the Seleucid court. Seleucid court. This was, now we're getting into the history. This was uh Greek Syrian rulership. That area, the Greek Syrian rulership was all those four generals we mentioned earlier, specifically the general of Seleucus. That's the Seleucid empire. He went to their court. During this time, he lived at the Seleucid court, where he acted as a military advisor to Antiochus the Third. I'm sorry, Antiochus III the Great. Now, who is Antiochus the Third the Great? Let's go back to First Maccabees 8. Now we're going to read verse 4 down through verse 6. First Maccabees. Now we read First Maccabees 8, 1 down to 3. Now we're going to read verse 4. First Maccabees 8 and verse 4. And that by their policy, Roman Republic, and patience, they had conquered all the place, though it were very far from them, and the kings also that came against them from the uttermost part of the earth, till they had discomforted them and given them a great overthrow, so that the rest did give them tribute every year. That's the policy they created, that Hannibal was trying, when he ran for office, was trying to usurp or change, but that he failed and went into exile. And when he flee, he went into the Seleucid, probably butchering that word, Seleucid court. He worked as an advisor. Understand that. Hannibal the Black, man, I gotta say that because y'all think Hannibal white. He ain't white. A warlike general who was expert in war sat as an advisor in the Seleucus or Seleucid court. This is Esau. He was an advisor for Esau. Okay. Verse 5. Besides this, how they had discomfited in battle Philip and Perseus, king of the Chittims, with others that lifted up themselves against them and had overcome them. So now here we're reading about the Roman Republic coming against Greek Syrian kings. This is what we're reading. Okay, verse 6. How also Antiochus the Great, king of Asia, that came against them in battle, having 120 elephants with horsemen and chariots and a very great army, was discomfited by them. So they even took down Alexander the Great king. This is the Alexander we just read in Wikipedia. Alexander the Third, the Great, was advised by Hannibal. Verse 6. So now, nope, before we read on, I'm gonna read verse 6 again. How also Antiochus the Great, king of Asia, that came against them in battle. Alexander the Great, who was over Asia, who came against the Roman Republic in battle, having 120 elephants with horsemen and chariots and a very great army, was discomfited by them. So Roman Republic destroyed them. Remember, we're going back to Wikipedia now. We're going to go back to Wikipedia about Hannibal, the Black. I'm going to keep stressing that, the Black ruler, warlike. Remember, Hannibal got defeated by the Roman Republic under Scipio Africanus in verse 3 when they took down Spain. Now he went in exile. He went to Greek area provinces, the Greek Syria area, which is the Seleucid area, Seleucid or Seleucus. And he was counseling and advising Alexander the Great. This is how you're going to destroy the Romans. Do this. But guess what Antiochus did? He didn't follow it, because he didn't want a black man to say he helped me take down the Roman Republic. So he didn't follow the counsel or the advisement from Hannibal. He instead did his own thing, and then he got destroyed by the Roman Republic. Okay, let's go back to the Wikipedia. I'm gonna read that history again. After the war, Hannibal successfully ran for the office of Suffet. He enacted political and financial reforms to enable the payment of the war indemnity imposed by Rome. Imposed by Rome. Those reforms were unpopular with members of the Carthaginian aristocracy and in Rome, and he fled in voluntary exile. During this time, he lived. This is the point. During this time, he lived at the Seleucid court, which he acted as a military advisor to Antiochus III the Great. This is what we read in First Maccabees 8 and 6. He advised Antiochus III the Great in how to defeat the Roman Republic. But Antiochus, the great king, did not follow his counsel. Instead, did his own thing and got defeated. And Roman Republic found out about him taking counsel from Hannibal because they didn't like Hannibal, because Hannibal put Rome to flight. Many battles. He just lost that one battle and he went in exile, but he fought many battles. The first Punic War and even the second Punic War, but later on in the second Punic War, he was defeated by Scipio Africanus. Okay, now we're going to go back to First Maccabees 8 and 6. How also Antiochus the great king, that's Antiochus the third of Asia, that came against them in battle, having 120 elephants with horsemen and chariots and a very great army, was discomforted by them, and how they took him alive. So the Roman Republic took Antiochus the third, the great king, alive, and covenanted that he and such as reign after him should pay a great tribute and give hostage, and that which was agreed upon. Why did they do this to him? Got all these, because we read from verse 1 down to verse 6, in all these other areas that Roman took, they didn't take hostages. Why, when they attacked Asia, when Antiochus the Antiochus III, the great king, uh, who counseled with Hannibal, who fought against him, why they took him hostage? They didn't just kill him like he did everybody else, because they was pissed off at him for taking counsel from or taking advisement from Hannibal. So with that being said, because of that, he said, we're going to take you hostage and we're going to tax you an unnumberable amount, meaning it was a high tax. Every other countries and various provinces they took over, they just taxed them every year and they had to pay taxes. But this king over Asia, Antiochus, the great king of Asia, uh, he was taxed a hefty tax. Here's the proof, because it says, verse 7, and how they took him alive and covenanted that he and such as reign after him should pay a great tribute. So not only did they tax the king, the great king Antiochus, they tax his seed, his whole lineage. So all his sons that come after him got to pay this great tax. So it was a big tax. They taxed them. And also they took hostages. And at this time, after they took him alive, they took his son. We're going to read that. They took his son, uh, Antiochus Epiphany. This is why I had to go to that history, because now we're connecting the dots. Antiochus the great king was Antiochus. Let's get that. First Maccabees 1 and verse. First Maccabees 1 and verse. We're going to read verse. We're going to start at verse. We're going to start at verse. We're going to start at verse 10. So recap real quick before we read that. First Maccabees 8 and 6 is Antiochus being conquered, and verse 7 is saying how he took Roman Republic took him alive, as well as taking hostages. And one of those hostages, they took his son, Antiochus Epiphany. This is that Daniel's 8 and 9. We just read about the little horn. This is when Antiochus Epiphany came into play. Okay, we're reading the history of it in the Maccabees. Now we're gonna go to First Maccabees 1 and 10 to prove Antiochus the great king is the father to Antiochus Epiphany, and he was taken to Rome as an hostage. Okay, First Maccabees 1 and verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphany, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome. And he reigned in the 130th and 7th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. This is Asia Minor. No. So now we're seeing who that great king. So the great king Antiochus the third is that same king we read in First Maccabees 8 and 6. This is Antiochus' father, who had to give his son Antiochus Epiphany to hostage to Rome. Why? Because what we just read in First Maccabees 8. And what the king did as far as counseling with Hannibal, the black ruler, warlike general who once ruled Spain and Carthage, which is today Tunisia. Okay, so let me read that again. First Maccabees 1 and 10. It says, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphany, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. This is when Antiochus took rulership. Came out of the wicked. So now I like that point. It says the wicked root. Let's go back to Daniel's 8 to connect the dots. This is how we can prove Daniel's 8 and verse. Let's read verse 9 again. Wait a minute. Yeah. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxing exceeding great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. That's what we just read in First Maccabees 8 and 10. Antiochus come out of Rome as a hostage, and we're going to explain how he came out of Rome as a hostage. His now mind you, Antiochus, the great king, had three sons. He had his heir, I forget his name, but the other two is more important in history. It was Antiochus, the great king, had his son Antiochus Epiphany, and his other son, the elder to him was Seleucus the fourth Philopator. Okay, uh, that was one of the sons, one of the two sons of Antiochus the great king, and one of them they took hostage to Rome as a because of the tribute covenant that he made with Antiochus the great king. They took his son to hostage, and now in First Maccabees 1 and 10, we're reading about how he got out. I mean, how he left Rome as a hostage, and how he did that was, I'll give you the history. Antiochus, I'm sorry, Seleucus the fourth, Philopator, his brother, Antiochus Epiphanes' brother, Seleucus Philopator, he gave his son Demetrius in replacement of his brother to be released from hostage. Okay, that's what happened. Now, before we get into that history, first let's go to First Maccabees. Uh, let's go to first. Well, let's go to First Maccabees. I'm sorry. Let's go to Daniel's 11. Before I tell you about that history about Seleucus the fourth Philopator, we're going to show you that biblically Daniel also prophesied about this. Daniel 11 verse 20. That's what we get. Daniel 8. I'm sorry. Daniel 11 verse 20. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes and the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. This raiser of taxes in the glory of his kingdom is talking about Seleucus the fourth Philopator, the other son to Antiochus the third, the great king. Again, Antiochus the third, the great king, had two sons, Antiochus Epiphany, who's now in Rome as a hostage, and now Seleucus the fourth Philopator. He is the one now succeeding Antiochus the third, great king. So he succeeded him. Antiochus the Great preceded him. So his successor was Seleucus the fourth Philopator. At this time, Antiochus Epiphany is in Rome hostage. So what we read in First Maccabees 1 and 10 is him coming out of hostage in Rome. So we fast forward a little bit, but now I'm going to take y'all a little back so we can connect the dots. So now we're going to read about Seleucus the fourth Philopator in Daniel's 11 verse 20. Let me read it again. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of his kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. So this is talking about Seleucus the fourth. He didn't die in battle nor in anger of war. He died a mysterious way. We're going to get the history. We're going to get the history. It's history in A, and we're going to get the history. So so Seleucus the fourth, right? So let's go to Second Maccabees, the third chapter. We're gonna go history about Seleucus the fourth Philopator. All right. Second Maccabees chapter 3, let's start at verse 1. Now, when the holy city was inhabited with all peace, and the laws were kept very well, because of the godliness of Onias the high priest and his hatred of wickedness. Now, you know, this history, we had a lot of wicked Israelites during the Hellenized time, which under the Greek captivity, under Greek kings that ruled over us, like Seleucus. Seleucus was actually a little lenient with us. He was wicked as hell, but in the beginning, he was a little lenient. We're gonna read the history about it. He wasn't too rough on us initially because he actually financed a lot of our sacrifices in the temple, like meaning financially. We're gonna read that. I'm gonna prove that. Let's read that Second Maccabees 3, verse 1 again. Now, when the holy city was inhabited with all peace, and the laws were kept very well, because of the godliness of Onias the high priest and his hatred of wickedness. Verse 2, it came to pass that even the kings themselves did honor the place and magnify the temple with their best gifts. Verse 3, and so much that Seleucus, this is Seleucus the fourth Philopator, Seleucus, king of Asia, who succeeded Alexander the Antiochus the third, the great king, he succeeded him, he came after him in his stead. And so much that Seleucus, the king of Asia, of his own revenues, bear all the costs belonging to the service of the sacrifice. Now, what is that saying? The Greek king over Asia was actually financing, giving money to the Onias, the high priest, to be able to sustain the temple, make the sacrifices, give money to the help the welfare. We had our own treasures. Don't get it twisted. We had our own treasures in the holy temple, in the holies of holies. But for some reason, this king, this great king, was actually funding the temple as well with his own finances. Let me read that again. Verse 3. First, we at 2 Maccabees 3:3. In so much that Seleucus, king of Asia, of his own revenues, bear all the costs belonging to the service of the sacrifices, meaning talking about the Onias priests and the sacrifices they made. Okay. Verse 4. But one Simon of the tribe of Benjamin. Nah, we getting this wicked of Israel right here. Benjamin, y'all wicked too. Don't just blame Levi. Y'all Benjamites, y'all wicked too. Okay. Verse 4. But one Simon of the tribe of Benjamin, who was made governor of the temple, fell out with the high priest about disorder in the city. Now, this wicked Israelite, Simon, his name is Simon, but he was from the tribe of Benjamin. Simon was wicked as hell. He didn't like Onias the high priest. Why? Because Onias taught against wickedness. He was a faithful high priest. He kept the commandments. Okay. So it says in verse 4 again, but one Simon of the tribe of Benjamin, who was made governor of the temple, fell out with the high priest about disorder in the city. And when he could not overcome Onias, he gave him to Apollonius, the son of Thracius, who then was governor of Celesyria and Phoenix, and told him that, verse 6, and told him that the treasure in Jerusalem was full of infinite sums of money, so that the multitude of their riches, which did not pertain to the account of the sacrifices, was innumerable, and that it was possible to bring all into the king's hand. This wicked Benjamite Simon went to the enemy, to Edomite Apollonius, and told him of the treasures that was in the temple. And you got to remember, you got to know, when we had treasures in the temple, that helped the fatherless, the widows, the orphanage. That's what the money was for. But this wicked Benjamite, because he couldn't overthrow Onias the high priest, he went to the heathen. You know, a lot of our people do that today. Wicked as hell. Love to go. Give me that Isaiah. Real quick, side note. Isaiah 30, in verse, these traitor Negroes. Isaiah 30, let's start at verse 1. Woe to the rebellious children, says the Lord, that take counsel, but not of me, and that cover with the covering, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin. These wicked, Isaiah prophesied it. Even to this day, we go to the heathen. We go vote. We go to the heathen to tell on our people. We go to the heathen for help. All this wicked stuff. So God said, destruction to you traitors that do that. The traitor of your own people. God hate a traitor. Okay, now let's go back. I don't want to go too much side note because I got a lot to cover. Okay, we're going back to 2 Maccabees, the 3rd chapter, and we're going to read the 6th verse again, verse 6. So Simeon, and he told him of the treasures in Jerusalem was full of infinite sums of money, so that the multitude of their riches, which did not pertain to the account of the sacrifices, was innumerable, and that in it was possible to bring all into the king's hands. So he said, the money that didn't pertain to the sacrifices, he said, this money that he talking about does not pertain to the sacrifices. This money he talking about is another money. It's innumerable, unlimited. Okay, I'm gonna show you, in the scholars know about this history to prove that. Now, we're gonna go to the who's who real quick. Now, I know I can't show you this. I'm gonna show you on the camera. Y'all can see this is the who's who. Bishop actually gave this book. He gave this book. We wrote to Jeraham, He said to Jeraham, don't think too much, read from Bishop to 10. Hey, so are we reading? We're going to read the history. We're going to read the history. So we're going to go to the who's who, and we're actually going to go under Seleucus, or some people say Seleucus. I say Seleucus. All right, we're going to go to Seleucus, the fourth Philopator. We're going to go under that and the who's who to prove what we just read in Second Maccabees, the third chapter. We read from verse 1 down to verse 6. Okay. Seleucus, we're reading the who's who and the Apocrypha and the who's who, Seleucus, the fourth Philopator. Ruler of the Seleucid kingdom between 187 and 75 BC, Seleucus IV succeeded his father Antiochus III, the great king. We just read about Antiochus III, the great king in First Maccabees 8 and 6. He succeeded him. He replaced him instead. Okay, on the Seleucid throne in Antioch, which is Asia. The king respected the religion of the Jews. Didn't we just read that? And the scholars understand. This is how you know we can't listen to Negroes that don't know history. Just stop. Stay away from us. Okay, the king Seleucus respected the religion of the Jews and the sanctuary of the temple. We read that in Second Maccabees, the third chapter, concerning in verse 3, and so much that Seleucus, king of Asia, of his own revenues, bear all the costs belonging to the service of the sacrifices. So he respected the temple. Hey, y'all do y'all keep y'all laws. I don't got no problem with y'all. Here's money if y'all need it to continue y'all sacrificing. The scholars understood this. I'm gonna read it again. The king respected the religion of the Jews and the sanctity of the temple, which he helped to maintain from his own revenues. However, on getting a report of great riches concealed in the temple in Jerusalem, Seleucus sent his chief minister Heliodorus with an armed guard to collect the gold and silver for the royal treasury. Heliodorus returned to report that, okay, I'm gonna stop there. I don't want to keep reading. I'm gonna stop there. We're gonna come back to the who's who. We're gonna go to the Bible now. We're gonna go Bible. We're gonna go to the history. Now we know the scholars is showing you that the Bible is a true book. Our foundation is the Holy Scriptures. We just showing you that the scholars understood something that the Negroes today don't understand. Or especially the Christian apologetics that say that the Apocrypha ain't canon. Just stay out of it. We just proved Daniel prophesied of what we're reading right now in the Maccabees, and also he prophesied of the Roman Republic. Okay, we're going back to Second Maccabees 3 about Simon the Benjamite, who that's how he got word. We read in the Bible who gave him word. Now Simon didn't go to Seleucus the fourth Philopator and told him. He told one of his generals, which was Apollonius, my bad. Excuse me, Israel. So he told him, and Apollonius ended up telling Seleucus the fourth Philopator, and Philopator sent his general Heliodorus. Okay, let's go to Second Maccabees, the third chapter. We're gonna read verse 7. Now we're in verse 7. Second Maccabees 3 and verse 7. Now when Apollonius came to the king and had showed him of the money whereof he was told, the king chose out Heliodorus, his treasurer, and sent him with a commandment to bring him the foresaid money. Verse 8. So forthwith Heliodorus took his journey under a choler of visiting the cities of Ciliocerius, Celosyria and Phoenix, but indeed to fulfill the king's purpose. Verse 9. And when he was come to Jerusalem and had been courteously received of the high priest of the city, he told him what intelligence was given of the money and declared wherefore he came and asked if these things were so indeed. So Heliodorus came to Jerusalem, came to the priest and all of them and asked and said, listen, I'm coming for this. I'm heard his money and treasures in the temple. Is this true? This is what he's doing. Verse 10. Then the high priest told him that there was such money laid up for the relief of widows and fatherless children. This is what Onias the high priest was telling him. He said, "Yeah, we do have money in there, but it's for the woman. It's for the women and fatherless children, the widows and women and fatherless children. It's for the needy, the poor. Like, remember, the law says we will always have poor amongst us." Okay, verse 11, and that some of it belonging to Hyrcanus, son of Tobias, a man of great dignity, and not as that wicked Simon had misinformed. He said, "Don't listen to that wicked Benjamite Simon who misinform you of what the money is for, because they think we're just using it for lavishness. No, it's for the poor amongst us." Okay, this is why Onias the high priest was a righteous king. He was doing what was commanded of him according to the law. Okay, verse 11 again, some of the and that some of it belonged to Hyrcanus, son of Tobias, a man of great dignity, and not as that wicked Simon had misinformed. The sum whereof in all was 400 talents of silver and 200 of gold. Verse 12, and that it was altogether impossible that such wrongs should be done unto them that had committed it to the holiness of the place and to the majesty of inviolable sanctity of the temple, honored over all the world. Verse 13, but Heliodorus, because of the king's commandment given him, said that in any wise it must be brought into the king's treasure. So despite Onias the high priest telling Heliodorus what the money is for and the true meaning of the money and what is for, and not of what Simon, who misinformed y'all of what it's for, he still said, despite all that, we still got to take the money. You know why? Because it's a commandment from the king, and that king was Seleucus the fourth Philopator. Okay, verse 14. So at the day which he appointed, he entered in to order this matter, wherefore there was no small agony throughout the whole city. So the whole city went in an uproar. The whole city. But the priests prostrating themselves before the altar in their priestly vestments called unto heaven upon him that made a law concerning things given to be kept, that they should safely be preserved for such as had committed them to be kept. So prostrating goes into the priest had his royal linen priest garment and laid flat on the ground. That's prostrating. They laid face down flat on the ground before the altar, praying to the Lord, and asking for forgiveness, while Heliodorus was preparing his army to go into the temple and go into the holy or wicked. Now remember, no wicked heathen can go into the temple. He was going into the temple, the holiest holies, to go take the treasures that was commanded of him by the king Seleucus the fourth Philopator. Okay. Verse 15 again. But the priests prostrating, laying flat on the ground themselves before the altar in their priest vestments, called unto heaven upon him that made the law concerning things given to be kept, that they should safely be preserved for such as had committed them to be kept. Verse 16. Then whoso had looked the high priest in the face, it would have wounded his heart, for his countenance and the changing of his color declared the inward agony of his mind. So people who looked at the priest, they're like, yo, you could tell he was in agony. Excuse me. Drink some tea. It's hard to read and teach at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Usually you have a reader. All right. In your mouth, you just need a little something to drink. Okay, verse 16. I'm sorry, verse 17. So now people who seen the priest's face, they say they knew something was wrong. He was in agony. Verse 17. For the man was so compassed with fear and horror of the body that it was manifest to them that looked upon him that what sorrow he had now in his heart. Meaning the people who looked on the priest, they seen this agony and sorrow in their heart just by looking at their countenance, their face. Verse 18. Others ran flocking out of their houses to the general supplication. So many people who saw it came out of their homes. This was in Jerusalem near the temple. Whoever lived in that area, they all came out of their homes, seeing what was going on with the priests, and they came in supplication, praying. What's going on? They started sending prayers up. Others ran flocking out of their houses to the general supplication, because the place was like to come into contempt. Verse 19. And the women girt with sackcloth under their breast, abounded in the streets. And the virgins that were kept in ran, some to the gates and some to the walls, and others looked out of their windows. So women came out, women, children, they all came out. The city was in a disarray. They all came out, oh, like everybody screaming, oh my God. It was crazy because they found out that these heathen Heliodorus about to go in the temple and take the treasure. So widows, fatherless children, women, virgins, they all ran to the gate. The gate goes into the leaders. They ran to the leaders to report the matter. So it's an upward. Can you imagine this chaos in the city? Not in the sense of fighting, but in the sense of mourning and supplication and prayer. That's what was taking place. They was running in prayer, hands in the heavens. Some was laying face down in the ground. Some was throwing sackcloth on themselves. So they was in mourning. Okay. Where we at? Verse 20. And all holding their heads toward heaven made supplication. That's how you know it's not fighting taking place right now. It's just a lot of prayer and mourning and panicking. In other words, that's where there was sorrow. They prayed, they made supplication. Verse 21. Then it would have pitied a man to see the falling down of the multitude of all sorts. You would think at this point, now remember, Onias pleaded to him by saying what the money was for. You would think that would change his heart. He still, hey, I still got to do what the king got to say. Now, after the action of the entire city in Jerusalem, all Israel was giving supplication and prayer. After you said, man with a conscience would have seen that, like, you know what? I ain't dealing, I ain't touching that. I am not going to the temple. Let me tell the king. But let's see what this wicked commander Heliodorus did. Okay, verse 21. Then it would have pitied a man to see the falling down of the multitude of all sorts, and the fear of the high priest being in such an agony. They then called upon Almighty Lord to keep the things committed of trust safe and sure for those that had committed them. Verse 23. Nevertheless, Heliodorus executed that which was decreed. Despite seeing all this city going array, he still got his army and went into the holies of holies. That is an abomination, Israel. That is an abomination. Verse 24. Now, as he was there, before we continue reading on, I want to read I want to read second. Let's go to 2 Corinthians real quick. 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapter 7. We're going to read verse 10. 2 Corinthians. Yes. Hold up. I'm in 1 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians. I want to give a precept concerning those widows, virgins, priests, all prostrating and praying and hands in heaven, praying to the Lord, giving supplication, mourning, actually up. So 2 Corinthians 7 and verse 10. For godly sorrow worketh repentance to salvation, not to be repented of. Understand what we're reading it. For godly sorrow worketh repentance. So what were people doing? They was repenting and in prayer and supplication. It says for godly sorrow. Let me get that as Psalms 51. Psalms 51. Psalms 51 and 17. Psalm 51, 17. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. So that's what we was exhibiting in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, it was a broken spirit, a contrite heart, a heart of sorrow, a heart of mourning, a heart of agony. I'm reading again, Psalm 51, verse 17. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. So Lord is saying what he truly accepts is a brother or sister that actually repents internally, wholeheartedly, and through actions later on, meaning you confess it. So the city of Jerusalem, there was in mourning and in contrite spirit. So I'm showing you the spirit of what was taking place down there. Now we're gonna go back to Second Maccabees. Um, let's go to Second Maccabees 11. Second Maccabees 11 and 6. I'm read that. We're gonna go back to Second Maccabees, the third chapter. I'm sorry, yeah, third chapter. Second Maccabees 11 and 6. Now, when they that were with Maccabeus heard that he besieged the holds, they and all the people with lamentation and tears besought the Lord that he would send a good angel to deliver Israel. That's some heavy stuff. Now, mind you, these are forefathers that actually was just like you and I. I'm gonna read it again. Second Maccabees 11 and 6. Now, when they that were with Maccabeus heard that he besieged the holds, they and all the people with lamentation and tears besought the Lord that he would send a good angel to deliver Israel. So that's some good stuff right there. So that's what that was taking place when we read in Second Maccabees, the third chapter, where they said the priest was prostrating, the widows came out, sending women came out, sending supplication hands into heaven. The virgins cast sackcloth on their head and also went to the gates, all making supplication to the multitude. So there's a multitude of people doing this. So I showed you, priest, of well, when you do this and your heart is pure and right towards God, you understand there's a power that we have we don't know we got. Let's go back to Second Maccabees, the third chapter. Remember, when we read in Second Maccabees 11, said that the Lord they prayed with tears, asking the Lord to send a good angel on our behalf. Now let's go back to the history. Second Maccabees, the third chapter, we left off at 24. Now as he was there present himself, present himself with his guard, the treasurer, the Lord of spirits, and the prince of all power caused a great apparition, so that all that presumed to come in with him were astonished at the power of God and fainted and were sore afraid. That's some good stuff. So after all this supplication, the broken and contrite spirit, the prayer with tears, the whole city in the uproar and supplication, the Lord sent that good angel that we read in Second Maccabees 11 and 6 about how the people prayed with tears of supplication, prayed that the Lord sent a good angel. So when you're doing that before the altar with a broken and contrite spirit, with godly sorrow, the Lord, that prayer pierced that clouds and go into heaven, and the Lord hear the prayers of the saints. Let you know the elect was in the midst. I'm gonna read it again, verse 24. Now, as he was there, present himself with his guard about the treasury, meaning Heliodorus and his guards went in the temple. They was right in front of the treasury. The Lord of spirits and the prince of all power caused a great apparition, so that all that presumed to come in with him was astonished at the power of God and fainted and were sore afraid. Verse 25, for there appeared unto them an horse with a terrible rider upon him and adorned with a very fair covering. And he ran fiercely and smote at Heliodorus with his forefeet. And it seemed that he that sat upon the horse had a complete harness of gold, meaning he was full dressed with full gold, pure gold. This is the Lord's good angel coming on our behalf. And a lot of time that happened for us. The Lord, that's why we got healing. And I was like, give me that. I'm roll up. Let me before I continue, let's go to let me see what I got. Let's go to Isaiah 13. I want to go to Isaiah 13 first. I'm going to show you that we got power that we don't even know we got power. And I ain't talk about when we get to the kingdom. I'm talking about now on earth. We have power. I'm going to prove it. We have power in prayer and fasting. And we proved that many times amongst Israel. All right, what time we got? Okay, I still got time. All right, Isaiah 13, let's start at verse 1. The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos did see. Lift you up a banner. That banner is the Bible. This is the Bible. This is the Bible. That banner is the Bible. Lift you up a banner. Exalt the voice unto them, meaning teach. Shake the hand that they may go into the gates of the nobles. I mean, when we teach, we pray that the Jesse Jacksons, these wicked of our people will go to the heathen. Did not Simeon the Benjamite do that against Onias the high priest in 2 Maccabees, the 3rd chapter? Okay. Lift you up a banner upon the high mountain. Exalt the Mahal Mountain goes into America, and he says, "Exalt the voice unto them," meaning we teach and expose America for their wickedness, meaning discover the wickedness. All right, shake the hand that they may go into the gates of the nobles. Verse 3. I have commanded my sanctified ones. There you go. Here's the point. I have commanded my sanctified ones. I have also called my mighty ones for my anger. So the sanctified one is us. We are the sanctified. We are the prophets. When we prophesy and cast down America and teach against America, the Lord does what? I have also called my mighty ones for mine anger, even them that rejoice in my highness. So when we prophesy and we in supplication and prayer, the Lord send apparitions. That is those mighty ones. That is those angels we just read in Second Maccabees, the 3rd chapter. When our forefathers prayed, and I don't want that, and I said in this time, because some of us think we're gonna get this power in the kingdom. No, 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 no. Au contraire. We have that power today if we in the spirit as Zephaniah 2:1, as a nation, if we in the spirit, the Lord will send his mighty ones on our behalf. And we've seen examples of that many, but now I'm gonna prove it in the scriptures. So let's go to we got the Isaiah. Let's go to where we at. I'm gonna go to Revelation. Revelation 11. So now Isaiah proved that we have power to call the angels on our in the behalf. Let's go to Revelation. Let's see if John confirms what Isaiah said. Revelation, I'm gonna start at verse 3. Okay. Let me move up my notes. Revelation 11:3. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses. Those are Judah and Ephraim, or twofold, Moses and Elijah. Okay. I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,203 days, clothed in sackcloth. That's Judah and Ephraim, 2 kingdoms. Verse 4. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. This two, let's get that. Let's get that. Zechariah, real quick. Zechariah, where we on? Zechariah 14. Is it 13 or 14? Oh, yeah. Nope. Zechariah 4. Okay, Zechariah 4, I'm going to start at verse 11. Then answered I and said unto him, what are these 2 olive trees? Upon the right side of the candlestick and upon the left side thereof. Verse 12. And I answered again and said unto him, what be these 2 olive branches which through the 2 golden pipes empty and golden oil out of themselves? So those 2 olive trees goes into Moses and Elijah, what we read in Revelations 11. Because when we read Revelation 11, it's going to prove that it's Moses and Elijah. Let's go back. Revelations 11 and verse 4. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. Talking about Moses and Elijah. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceeded out of their mouth and devoured their enemies. What fire proceeded out of the mouth of these 2 olive trees, Moses and Elijah? What fire? Let's get that in Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 5 in verse 14. Wherefore, thus says the Lord God of hosts, because you speak this word, behold, I will make my words in thy mouth fire, and this people wood, and it shall devour them. That's the fire that proceeded out of the mouths of the prophets, as we have till this day. So what am I proving? I'm showing you what we read in Isaiah. The Lord have commanded his mighty ones, his angels, when we prophesy, when we lift you up a banner and lift up our voice. That's called prophesying. So now we're showing an example of this. Our forefathers did this thing. Okay, verse 5 again, Revelations 11, and we're going back to Revelation 11 and 5. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceeded out of their mouth and devoured their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. What manner? He that leadeth to captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. That's how he go. In that manner, he killed, he devoured and touched all his anointed, the apple of Lord's eye. Therefore, you will be you receive the same judgment. Revelation 11 and verse 6. These have power to shut heaven. Now he's going to tell you what these two what power these two olive trees have. These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophesying. We read that about Elijah. Well, I said Elijah and Moses, right? Yeah, Elijah and Moses. Yeah. Elijah was the one that stopped rain for 3 years. You read that history in the book of Kings. That's how we know. Now he's giving a clue who these have power to do. One of them have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them into blood. Who turned water into blood? We read that in the book of Exodus, in Moses, when Moses went to Pharaoh and turned water into what? Blood. So we're proving to you who those two olive trees are. And to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. Wait a minute. Moses smitten the earth with plagues. Today, these plagues are taking place on earth. Guess who's prophesying on earth today? The same prophets of old. The bishops, the deacons, the leaderships of IUIC, we're prophesying. That's why the plagues are being revamped back, coming back on earth, destroying the nations, floods, earthquakes, things of that nature. So we have that power today, is what I'm saying. I'm proving it to you. Okay. Now let me further prove that. Give me where we at? Where we at? I'm gonna go to James 5:14. Let me seal a deal here. James 5:14. The book of James, chapter 5 and verse 14. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick. I'm saying to you, we have that power today. We have the power to activate the mighty ones of the Lord, the angels of God, as we read in the second Maccabees, the 3rd chapter, and also the 11th chapter, where Judas Maccabees in his army and prayed with supplication with tears. The Lord sent a good angel in our behalf. Okay, James 5:14 again. And is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. Verse 15, and the prayer of the faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sin, they shall be forgiven him. Now, James is saying this. The next verse, he's going to seal a deal. Verse 16, confessing your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. That's what we've seen in the history of the Maccabees, where our forefathers understood this thing. Here's the now after James said all that, he's going to give you historically an example of our forefather Elijah. Verse 17. Elias is in Greek, but Elijah, talking about Elijah. Elijah was a man subject to like passions as we are. This is why I say I'm gonna prove that we have that power today. Like passion means he was subject to the things we subject to today. Elijah didn't have superpowers. In other words, he was flesh and blood like we are today. He was. I'm gonna read it again. Elijah was a man subject to like passions as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. Verse 18. And he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth brought forth her fruit. What that's proven, ladies and gentlemen, Israel, we have the power to manipulate the weather. We have the power to call angels on our behalf. We have the power to get angels to fight on our behalf. Listen, we protected on this earth. Ain't nothing to be afraid of, because we have the power in this book. As long as we confess our faults and repent and fast and anoint, we got the power to shake kingdoms today, present time. All right. That's some heavy stuff. This some faith builder right here. Okay. All right. I went all through all that. We're gonna go back to Second Maccabees. Now we're gonna circle back. We're gonna circle back to Second Maccabees, the third chapter. I'm showing you what we read in what we read in here in history, that we have the power to this day. Okay. So when our forefathers prostrated before the temple, the priests prostrated, meaning lay their face down on the dirt before the priest. I'm sorry, before the altar, and the widows, the women, the virgins, the brothers, they all came out hands in heaven, praying with supplication, like we just read in James chapter 5. Guess what the Lord did? Verse 24, the middle part of verse 24, the Lord of spirits and the prince of all the power caused a great apparition, so that all that presumed to come in with him were astonished at the power of God, and fainted, and were so afraid. Verse 25, for there appeared unto them an horse with a terrible rider upon him, and adorned with a very fair covering, and he ran fiercely and smote at Heliodorus with his forefeet, and it seemed that he that sat upon the horse had complete harness of gold. He was dressed fully gold. Okay. Verse 26. Moreover, two other young men appeared before him, not able in strength, excellent in beauty, and comely in apparel, who stood by him on either side and scourged him continually, and gave him many sore stripes. Verse 27, and Heliodorus fell suddenly upon the ground and was compassed with great darkness, but they that were with him took him up and put him in the litter. Verse 28, thus him and lately came with a great train of lately came with a great train, and with all his guard into the said treasure they carried out, being unable to help himself with his weapons, and manifestly they acknowledged the power of God. For he For he by the hand of God was cast down and lay speechless without all hope of life. But they praised the Lord that had miraculously honored his own place for the temple, which a little afore was full of fear and terror and trouble, when the Almighty Lord appeared, was filled with joy and gladness. So when the Lord, when our forefathers seen what took place, they all rejoiced in with gladness. Verse 31. Then straightway certain of Heliodorus' friends prayed Onias that he would call upon the Most High to grant him his life. So the gods of Heliodorus came to Onias, the high priest. Remember, Onias been pleading to him, they fall back. He ain't fall back. So now they're coming again to Onias, the high priest, saying, listen, pray for our general Heliodorus, because he's about to die. Have mercy. Okay. Verse 31 again. Then straightway certain of Heliodorus' friends prayed Onias that he would call upon the Most High to grant him his life, who lay ready to give up the ghost. Verse 32. So the high priest suspected lest the king should misconceive that some treachery had been done to Heliodorus by the Jews, offered a sacrifice for the health of the man. So Onias thought wisdom. He said, if I don't do this, telling himself this, they're going to think we overthrew him and killed him. They're going to send an army and wipe us all out. So he suspected that. He said, let me pray and sacrifice for this to life of it. So he agreed, and he consented to the friends of Heliodorus. Okay. Because with wisdom, he understood something. He's seen a bigger picture. Verse 32. So I reread that. Verse 33. Now, as the high priest was making that an atonement, the same young men in the same clothing appeared and stood beside Heliodorus, saying, give Onias the high priest great thanks, and so much as for his sake, the Lord hath granted thee life. You see that's power. You see the power we have? The prayer. Give me that again. Let's go back to James, because y'all might have missed it. Let's go back to James. Let's go back to James chapter 5. I'm showing you the power we have in this present time. James chapter 5, verse 16. Confess your faults one to another and pray one for another, that you may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. We got the power to heal. We got the power to manipulate the weather. We got the power to have mighty ones come on our behalf and fight for us on our behalf. We have that power. Read on. After James said that the effectual The effectual fervent prayer of the righteous man availeth much. After he said that, the next verse, he's confirming the power we have. Verse 17. Elias, when a man was a man subject to like passions as we were. So he's saying these ain't no person that got supernatural power. Elijah was subject to like passions as we were, as we are till this day. Meaning he was subject to the things we subject to today, captivity and all this good stuff. Okay. And he prayed earnestly. That's why it says, pray without ceasing. 3 times a day we got to pray, Israel. 3 times a day we have to pray. Morning, even like right before this class, I send the prayers. So we just put our alarms off. So we got to pray because it says, because why? Because James giving us counsel. He says and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain. I mean, it didn't just one prayer. He continued, and it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. So let's go back. So Second Maccabees, let's read 3 verse 33 again. Now, as the high priest was making an atonement, meaning prayer and giving a sacrifice on the behalf of Heliodorus, the same young man, meaning the young man, he talking about those apparitions, those angels, 2 of them, because they was whooping Heliodorus behind. I'm gonna go jump up. Verse 26. We was on 33. I'm gonna read verse 26 again. Second Maccabees 3rd chapter, verse 26. Moreover, 2 other young men appeared before him, not able in strength, excellent in beauty, and comely in apparel, who stood by him on either side and scourged him continually and gave him many sore stripes. They were whooping this dude ass. I'm sorry my name. They was whooping his behind. They were beating him. They were like, you know how they whooped us back in slavery in 1619 with the whip and with the cattle tail, and they whipped our backs. This is what they was doing to this dude. They're like, yo, who told you to come in this temple? Remember when Christ went in the temple, he flipped tables and whipped some of them? That's what was taking place. Christ did it in the physical form, but we reading the spiritual angels came down and appeared unto everybody and the guards and Heliodorus and did the same thing. Because notice when you go in the temple, they whoop you with a whoop. They whoop you with a belt. You know what I'm saying? It happened with Christ's time, and now we see it here in the Maccabees before Christ. Okay, now we're going back to verse 33. Now, as the high priest was making an atonement, the same young man in the same clothing appeared and stood beside Heliodorus, saying, Give Onias the high priest great thanks, and so much as for his sake the Lord hath granted thee life. Because of the prayer of the high priest, of the elect, of the saints, the heathens could be healed, as well as we can heal ourselves, those who sick amongst us, as we've seen it done countless, continually. Verse 34, and seeing this, and seeing that thou hast been scourged from heaven, this is the angel still talking to them, declare unto all men the mighty power of God. And when they have spoken these words, they appeared no more. So they say, seeing that you've been beat up by heaven, by the angels, make sure you tell everybody. And they disappeared. They ascended. Okay, that's some powerful stuff, Israel. This is some powerful stuff. Now, before we read on, I'm gonna go back to the scholars. We're gonna go back to the scholars. We're gonna go back to the who's who, and we're gonna go under Seleucus the Fourth Philopator. Remember, let me catch y'all up a little bit because we went in a little bit in the deep history. Seleucus the Fourth Philopator was the son of Antiochus the Third, great king. One of the sons. The other son, Antiochus Epiphanes, who we're gonna read later on, he went into hostage under Rome. Why? Because of Antiochus, his father, Antiochus the Third, the Great, took advisement, although he didn't follow it, from Hannibal. And Rome, the Roman Republic found out about it, and they was mad about it. So they took him alive and took hostages and gave him a hefty penalty that he had to pay through him and his seed after him. So now we're reading his seed that raised up after him was Seleucus the Fourth Philopator, which was Antiochus Epiphanes' brother. Okay. Now we're going back to the history and the who's who. Okay, who's who under Seleucus the Fourth Philopator. However, on getting a report of great riches concealed in the temple in Jerusalem, Seleucus sent his chief minister Heliodorus with an armed guard to collect the gold and silver for the royal treasury. Heliodorus returned to report that his attempt to do so had been thwarted by divine intervention, and he himself severely flogged by two supernatural beings. You see what Esau understand this. The white man, the scholars understood this thing. This took place historically. Okay. So they didn't remember he didn't get killed because Onias sacrificed on his behalf and they granted him life. Okay. So he was able to go back to his king, Seleucus the fourth Philopator. Now, mind you, we started this history on Daniel's 11. I ain't forget about the point. We going back to Daniel's 11. We're going back to Daniel's 11 and 20, but I had to go through this history to explain that one verse. Okay. So now he said he was flogged by two supernatural beings. And I mean, at one stage, Onias, the high priest, came personally to appeal to the king against the intrigues of one Simon, meaning he said, so Onias himself went to the king and said, listen, Onias misinformed y'all when he told Apollonius, one of your generals, that we had treasures here just living lavishly. No, these treasures are for the widows, for the poor. So he came on the behalf of the high priest to speak to the king, who had instigated the story about the temple's treasures, meaning Simon the Benjamite, who instigated this thing. Seleucus. Okay, now, before we read this part, I'm gonna go back to the who's who. We're going back to Daniel's 11, verse where we started off at Daniel's 11 and verse 20. Daniel's 11, verse 20. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed. Seleucus the fourth Philopator only ruled for 12 years, as similar to Alexander the Great. He didn't rule long. He ruled 12 years. That's why it says within a few days or short time he was destroyed. Neither in anger nor in battle. Why does it say that? Because he didn't die in battle or in anger or nothing. He died by he was poisoned. He was poisoned by Heliodorus. Heliodorus was the one he sent to the temple to gather the treasure. Heliodorus was his treasurer who he sent to Jerusalem to collect the temple. He was the one that was beat up. We just read in 2 Maccabees, the 3rd chapter, was beat up by the angels. So later on in time, Heliodorus ended up poisoning him, trying to take the kingdom and rule in his stead as king over the Seleucid dynasty or empire. He poisoned him. So this is what it means by verse Daniel's 11 and verse 20 again, where it reads, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle. He wasn't destroyed in battle nor in anger. He died through poison by Heliodorus. Okay, let's go back to the who's who. We're gonna read again. We're gonna read again the latter part of under the definition of Seleucus the fourth Philopator. Seleucus was killed by Heliodorus in 175 BC, and the throne seized by his brother Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, so Antiochus Epiphanes came after him. Now remember, Seleucus the fourth Philopator had a son named Demetrius. He had two sons, Demetrius and one named Antiochus. Antiochus was supposed to follow after him. They always called themselves Antiochus or Seleucus, so don't get it twisted. This was Antiochus, Seleucus the fourth Philopator's son. He had two sons, Demetrius and one named Antiochus. Antiochus was supposed to take the rulership. He did. He was young. He only ruled for 5 years. And Antiochus Epiphanes came, because mind you, before Seleucus the fourth Philopator died, was poisoned by Heliodorus, his treasurer. Heliodorus tried to take the seat, but he failed. That didn't work. They didn't fall. He ended up running into exile. What happened was Antiochus, the son to Seleucus the fourth, before he passed, was supposed to take the throne. But before Seleucus the fourth Philopator was poisoned, he took one of his sons, which was Demetrius' son, to try to give him as a hostage to Rome. He did that because he wanted to free his brother Antiochus Epiphanes. Let's read that in 1 Maccabees 1 and 10. We read that earlier. Let's read it again. I know it kind of seemed a lot of history because it gets confusing because the names are similar, but we're talking about different individuals. 1 Maccabees 1 and verse 10 again. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphany, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So he ended up taking the rulership. Because remember, um, Seleucus, why? Because Seleucus, before he was poisoned and killed by Heliodorus, he gave he gave Demetrius as a replacement. Demetrius is the son, is one of his sons, as a replacement for Seleucus, I mean Antiochus Epiphany, who was in hostage in Rome. That's how he was freed. So I'm showing you how he got free. History proof that he got out by a replacement by his brother Seleucus the Fourth giving his son on his behalf. And when he did that, Demetrius was the one in hostage. One of Demetrius is the son of Seleucus the Fourth, was a hostage in Rome, and Antiochus Epiphany came out. And when he came out, then Heliodorus killed Seleucus the Fourth, tried to take the kingdom, but that didn't work. Antiochus, his son, his other son, took the throne. Took the throne. And guess what? Antiochus Epiphany did. Let's go to Second Maccabees 4:7. But after the death of Seleucus, we just read it. Death. Why? Because Seleucus died through poison. We just read that in Daniel 11:20. He died neither through anger nor in battle. Instead, he was killed by Heliodorus through poisoning, because Heliodorus wanted to take the kingdom, but that didn't work because Antiochus moved him out the way. Antiochus is the son to Seleucus the Fourth Philopator. He was the next heir in line. Okay, but upon Antiochus Epiphany being released from hostage, and who replaced him was Demetrius the First Soter, he came and killed Antiochus, the son to Seleucus, or his nephew, the son to Seleucus the Fourth Philopator. He killed them and took the throne. Here's the proof. Second Maccabees 4:7. But after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus called Epiphany took the kingdom, how you take the, it was controversy. He took the kingdom, meaning he was not next in heir. His brother Antiochus Epiphany was not next under Seleucus the Fourth. When Seleucus died, he was not next to heir. His son, when you die, your son supposed to take heir. But Antiochus Epiphany killed his nephew, which was the son to Antiochus Seleucus the Fourth. So he killed him. So verse 3. But after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus called Epiphany took the kingdom, Jason, the brother of Onias, labored underhand to be high priest. So this is a lot of craziness taking place here. So Antiochus took the kingdom from his nephew Antiochus after he was released from Rome. So at this point, Demetrius went into captivity. Let me get First Maccabees 8:31 concerning Demetrius, because Demetrius was one of the sons to Seleucus who ended up going to Rome, who was used to, because Seleucus sent his son Demetrius to Rome to free his brother Antiochus Epiphany, and that worked. When he got freed, Seleucus got put to death by Heliodorus by poison, and Antiochus Epiphany killed his nephew Antiochus to take the kingdom. Let me get First Maccabees 8:31. And as touching the evils that no, that's not what I want. Is it Second Maccabees? Let me see. That's not what I want. I might have wrote that wrong. Let me see. Nope, that's not what I want. Anyways, so what time it is? 6:40. Let me go back to Second Maccabees, the third chapter, to finish that chapter, and we're gonna close it out there. We left off at verse 35. So when we read Daniel 11-20, why Seleucus didn't die in anger or in battle? Because he was poisoned by Heliodorus. Okay, so going back, finishing this chapter, we in verse 35. Second Maccabees 3, verse 35. So Heliodorus, after he had offered sacrifice unto the Lord and made great vows unto him that had saved his life, and saluted Onias, returned with his host to the king. That's what we just read in the Who's Who. When he returned to the king, he told him what happened. He said, listen, don't mess with these folks. Verse 36, then testified he to all men the works of the great God, which he had seen with his eyes. And when the king asked Heliodorus who might be a fit man to be sent yet once again to Jerusalem, he said, if thou hast any enemy or traitor, send him thither, and thou shalt receive him well scourged if he escape with his life. For it, for in that place, no doubt, there is an especial power of God. He said, listen, you think it's a game. If you want to send somebody, send your enemy. Because I guarantee you he's gonna come scourge if if he escape with his life. Verse 39, for he that dwelleth in heaven hath his eyes on that place and defended it, and he beat it and destroyed them that come to hurt it. And the things concerning Heliodorus and the keeping of the treasure fell out on this sort. So now later on in time, now we read it in Who's Who concerning what happened to Heliodorus and what he attempted to do. He attempted to take the throne from Seleucus the Fourth Philopator by killing him through poisoning, in which he succeeded to do so. But before that happened, years have passed where Seleucus freed his brother from Rome hostage uh, by giving his son Demetrius as a replacement. And when his brother came out, Seleucus died, and then his son after him ruled Antiochus for 5 years. And later on, I think it was from 170 BC to 175 BC, and Antiochus Epiphanes took the kingdom from him and killing him and taking the throne. And that's when all hell broke loose. And we're going to get into that the next time I do History in the AM, a continuation of this class. I'm going to wrap it up here. We ended off in Second Maccabees, the 3rd chapter. Next time I'll come on, I'm going to continue on with the history. We're going to go back to go back to Daniel's 11, because we've just read Daniel's. This is just Daniel's 11 and verse 20, the history of Seleucus. We're going to go to that verse 21 when Antiochus come in a scene, and I showed you how he got there by killing his nephew Antiochus, which was the son to Seleucus the Fourth, and he took the kingdom. And when he took the kingdom, he wreaked havoc. He just went, all hell broke loose. So that was Seleucus the Fourth Philopator, who was the son to Antiochus the Third, great king. And this is like, and remember, this was the Antiochus the Third. He's the Antiochus the Third, so that means he had Antiochus and Seleucus before him. He had, I think, 5 kings before Antiochus the Third, great king, ruled during the time of the Roman Republic was taken over. So they had a lot of kings before him. Like over 80 something years has passed from that time. So next week we're going to start off with Daniel's 11 again in verse 20 down, and we're going to connect the dots with Second Maccabees, the 4th chapter. We're going to go to hit the 4th chapter, show how Antiochus, he became the next ruler on the scene. All right, Israel, Most High Christ bless you. I hope y'all got some edification so far from this class. With that, that's all I got. With that, Israel, say shalom.